everybody. This is Rafiq Bhatia with Son Lux, joined today by a man who needs no introduction, the great Deantoni Parks, who you might have heard with John Cale, Flying Lotus, Bosnian Rainbows, We Are Dark Angels, Sade, or any number of other people, but who's, in my mind, the pinnacle of whose work is his own project, Technocell, and who is a visionary thinker, extraordinary musical mind and technological mind, here to talk with me today about the singularity, among other things. Welcome, D. How you doing?
Thank you, Rafiq. And I mean, listen, that was a wonderful introduction. I'm gonna try to live up to all of that, of course, but very excited to be here with you.
Yeah, man, likewise. I'm not going to ask you where you are because I know you work in clandestine ways. So let's just say that you're somewhere in orbit.
That's for sure.
And so I think it might be pertinent to start with an exploration of your relationship to technology and how we think about technology, and I think especially at a time where there is such a drive towards the incorporation directly of machines in performance, and the sort of integration between sort of what we think about as mechanical, which has to do largely at this point with computing. So much of what you do strikes me as being, the sort of zenith of what's possible with human or technological, non-human technological means. But I feel like you're harvesting a different kind of technology, and there are like science fiction novels and things like this in which people grow technology and it's biological in nature and organic in nature. And, we can imagine futures in which are, rather than using kind of computing-based technology, the world would move towards organic technology. And I feel like your presence in music foreshadows such a occurrence, because it's on the one hand using mechanics that have been around for so long, like the drum set has been with us for a long time. And before that, percussion instruments are, some of the oldest instruments we have. And of course, like our own technical facility is something that dates back to our existence. And then the sort of keyboard sampler sequencer kind of triggering systems are, also like it's this direct to touch kind of methodology. And for people who aren't familiar with your work, which I'm sorry for them, you guys have to check out videos of Dee performing, because a lot of what you hear on records, it sounds super heavily produced, that, feels like it could have only been the result of pretty heavy post-production, is captured with a fluidity, because what Dee is doing is so facile and so direct and comes to life in the moment, in response to a moment. And that's only possible because he's using such direct means. And so I want to talk to you about that, Dee. I know that's a long question, but it's sort of, I feel like at a time where there are so many emerging technologies and there are a lot of people who are working on incorporating those things, your work to me is a reminder of the fact that even ancient technologies have untapped potential and future, and sometimes actually the imagination is kind of the most important means of foreseeing what's possible and what can be possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's well said. I mean, and you're spot on with all of that, particularly that ending piece. You know, I mean, being born in the late '70s and like being pre-MIDI and watching MIDI come and watching MIDI was a big deal. That wave hit me strongly as I was already performing. I was already into one interface, which was the drum, which is a superior interface, and it has been with us for forever. Exist in our own bodies, of course, and then the keyboard was my next interface that I was fascinated with, because just the way it's set up with the mapping abilities it has, and still percussive, but the notes are arranged in a different way. And then quickly, I love piano, but I also love ghosting the internal sound and creating, being able to trigger any sound. So that MIDI really hit me hard. And since then, since '85, '86. I've really been experimenting with those two interfaces, the drum set and the keyboard, and until now, it's funny that I just now brought them together. But I've always been practicing, using sequencers, and I would compose and then jump on the kit and then enjoy that interaction. But it was a bit, separated, and I never like that, and so this is a very long journey for me to bring them together.
Sure.
And be able to access these things, this information in real time, which is the ultimate. I believe in flow state. As humans, the technology and human thing is. I've had so many revelations within that. For so long. And my most recent one is stumbling across this term, Technocell. As soon as I saw that, it really revealed so much to me that I had been missing since that '80s time period through the '90s, blah, 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 and on and on. And when I saw that, sometimes a word can do that for you. It almost acted as the chemical language, in that way. I saw exactly what the word meant within it was all there. So for me, I repurposed that term, of course, to say that the self, meaning all bio life forms, are the only technology. Everything else is a tool. And that really simplified a big idea for me. Yeah. And as you can see, I've kind of run with it. As soon as I repurposed that, I understood that. And so honestly, that's how I look at things. I look at things as the only technology that there really is plants and bio life forms. We still don't know what photosynthesis is. We still don't know how that works. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's so much, like you said, ancient technology here that we just consider things that we can buy at Best Buy technology. You know what I'm saying? That's because of the consumer environment we live in, okay? But I believe in that statement so much that I've even started my own school to literally base that idea off of, to literally change our thoughts on this, you know what I mean? Especially for my creative technologists out there, including us, and well, essentially every human being. Every human is a scientist. We're all creative and we're all scientists, like no more separating. You see what I'm saying? We're taught that like the scientists come over here and everyone else go over here,
Yeah.
What an illusion, No, let's come back to the reality where our technology, our data is the heaviest here. You're talking, what, 1 million+ years of human data that we've collected and been here 20,000 years for our civilizations. And we're supposed to be afraid of AI. Like, how many years does AI have underneath its belt, you know? But again, with that statement about us biolife forms being the only real technology, they, you know, these things start to become real and you can kind of discover that for yourself. So that's just where I am mentally. And that's the message that I'm sending in this kind of post-tech czar world that we're in, you know? I mean,
I don't know if we're post. I think we're
you
very
know,
tech czar moment. But yeah, I'm really glad that I wasn't totally off base with that. You know, in
oh, you
terms
were spot on, man.
because it strikes me as something that is reorienting and reaffirming in a lot of ways. You know, because I think when you consider the fact that, you know, like when all of us listen to music, what our brains are doing, as far as we understand, is there is a kind of empathy that's happening where you're imagining what other human beings had to do, what movements they had to make to generate, you know, the sound that is being produced. And I think that inside of that, you know, reality, there's something extra powerful about coming to bear witness how human action can be so deeply inspired by ways of organizing and producing and relating to sound that actually have very little, if anything, or any basis anyway. I won't say anything to do with, but any basis in direct human action on our environment, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And for me, there's this experience that I've had in seeing you perform where it's just so direct again, that sort of returning to the consequences of our actions being on full display and being like the, you know, a centerpiece of the practice. And so no matter how far the sound gets from what you might have thought of as being the result of this sort of action, you know, it's like being able to use your fingers to manipulate audio in that sort of direct way. What the MIDI interface kind of does is it like almost allows you to, like, with a single note, you know, hit touch of your finger, instead of having the reaction be the kind of sound that it would have if you hit a surface, you know, or like with a piano, it's like a hammer hitting a string, you know what I mean? Instead of that, with every touch, it's like a sculpture being sculpted, you know?
That's
And
right.
It's sort of, but because it's all emerging directly out of that sort of hands-on approach, there's something for people who witness it that is clarifying about the nature of what they're experiencing.
Yes.
And I can't help but think that in a live performance setting, especially, that's part of what can elevate the human experience, is for it to be something where what you're hearing is tied to what somebody is doing.
Yes.
And also that because it's so directly tied to what you're doing, that, you know, somebody who's looking at it and being like, oh, this is old technology, or this isn't the latest technology, forgets that this is more immediate than the latest technology, you know, and it's actually so, you know, the processor in your brain is so sophisticated, and you just totally, like, you've evolved that computer, that internal computer, to be at a level where the machines would be struggling to keep up.
Facts.
So it's, you know, I'm wondering what that, like I've read that you've talked about the importance of that immediacy in your practice, but I wonder whether you can relate that, or how you relate that back to your choice of tools, and whether that decision is something that reflects like an underlying aesthetic priority,
Oh yeah. I mean, well, I use those particular two interfaces because those are the most comfy for me to speak on. I mean, that's why I had to, involve, of course, the acoustic drums, which I am just, that's that ancient, talk about collective memory. Everyone knows this song, the drum, you know what I mean? So having that there, but then also bringing in that tool to solve a problem. The keyboard came in as a problem solver to what I was looking for, which is writing things and composing in real time, of course, to give me different results, and then also using the more cognitive side of myself, essentially, that part of us that does so much of the work that we don't even have to pay attention to. I've essentially assigned these tasks to more so that side of my body and mind because of the real time aspect. Like I said, we have at least 1,000,000+ years of human data just that we all come with embedded in this is what we get. It's in the manual if you read it. And starting with that, you understand that you have access to lots of rhythms. I just call it all data, and that's just our intelligence and all of these things that we've amassed. We come with a library of this stuff. Typically, a lot of these things are mysteries to us. We can't just kind of reach in there and grab it, It's kind of in places that we kind of have to find almost cheat codes to try to get in there and find these kind of mysterious wells of energy.
Yeah.
As the same outwards, there's in space, we can only see up to 14.5 billion years back. That's just a very dim light. Obviously there's more. And that's kind of what's going on in our own brains. So the way that I mine that information is by existing in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because our data is, that we're made to, that's kind of where our data is and our expertise is as humans, is being in the moment.
Yeah.
We're a machine that can react in like split second, transaction time, so I find that being in that kind of flow state when I'm not thinking as much, basically participating in a transient hypofrontality experiment, it kind of lets me use the data and all of the muscle memory and all those things in different ways.
Like shutting down all the applications on your computer so that the ones that you're running use the available processing power as fully as possible. And I think the thing that you just said about there being these sort of mysterious, difficult to access parts of how our brain works, it brings to mind how, like as an observer of your practice and seeing how you've been able to break through not just the interfaces that you're using, but also what the implications of what you're doing break certain conventions in music in general. So like no matter how you produce the music that you're making, it appears somewhat impossible. You know what I mean? And I think for somebody who's watching it happen, the beauty of it is, like I was saying in the past question, when you're watching it happen, you understand exactly how it's happening in a way, even as there's this mystery of how it is possible for someone to be able to do what you're doing. There isn't so much of a question about like what is happening in the same way that there is when you listen to the music without seeing someone do it, because it's hard to imagine anyone being able to do what you're doing through any means. Not just, it doesn't change it when you find out. Like, I remember when I first heard Technocell, and it was before I really knew about your solo practice. Somebody mentioned that it was all performed live. And I would have thought that I would be amazed by that, or like that would heighten my appreciation of it in some kind of way. But it actually didn't at all. Like I was just like, in a way, it was like, oh, that makes sense. Like that's the only thing
Mm.
that would be possible, because the producer side of my brain was like, how would you program this? There's no way, the machines can't do this. So like, and I guess sharing your ultimate belief in the fact that the machines can inspire us, but we have a better technology that we can put to work, than that. Uh,
Facts. Hmm.
but in terms of those hard to access parts of your brain,
Hmm.
one of the things that machines do so well, which make them immediately appealing for this kind of thing, I feel like, is the ability for, like you've got a certain amount of processing power and memory, and then you can basically run any combination of processes or applications at once. So
Hmm.
multitasking wise, without very much work, the thing just immediately multitasks fully, you know?
Oh yeah.
And
Hmm.
one of the things about human beings is that we're not really wired that way naturally. And so, like it's hard to develop that independence of mind. And
Right.
when I heard your music, I was like, okay, it makes so much sense that he's a drummer, not only because of the obvious, like, way in which the music is organized and stuff like that, but the independence in it is something that drummers are uniquely kind of tasked with cultivating, and have developed over the years and centuries a praxis for cultivating the ability to multitask and to extend your body and your mind in all of these different directions simultaneously, like what people call independence. Uh,
Yes.
and I was wondering how that practice of developing independence in the way that you did early on, like whether you see that as, this is totally a leading question, but I'm wondering if and how you see that independence factoring into the broader sort of cognitive independence that has been required for you to make the kind of music that you're making now.
Yeah, well, it goes back to that data, and I like to do as much of the, obviously the ability that we have to process is unmatched, just mentally, and so I guess playing multiple instruments at once has really taught me is to just to really, it's taught me to see the limbs as literal as machines themselves, obviously, like each limb, I would just kind of look at like just from the shoulder to the hand, like just an arm, and just kind of look at it like, um, I guess when I was younger, I would look at just encyclopedic kind of pictures and anatomy pictures, and they literally didn't look human to me. Like I don't know. I know I'm human, okay, but I was already. This was pre the whole, technology and self coming together. So I was kind of like still kind of almost baffled, and it was all still mysterious. But I just looked at the, like the human foot and the hand as these things are like insane machines, But it was almost like I wasn't allowed to. Um, I didn't have those kind of mentors at that time that were into computer science or any kind of engineering, you know what I mean? So I was kind of far away from those people, but those things were stirring up just because of what I'm looking. So I wanted to make sure I knew that I could do a lot of the effects of VSTs and such delays or stutters or all the VSTs I love, but I would make sure I could process these things within my body,
Yeah. And
before I,
was that like a conscious,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt you, but was that a conscious
yeah.
thing that you were doing in response to hearing those kinds of effects deployed in music?
Yes, because I was a big fan of Square Pusher and
Yeah.
all of these amazing, the early Amon Tobin records, and drum and bass for Papa, and Plug, and like, oh, as soon as I heard, I knew that these things were not able to be played by a live musician, so that literally intrigued me, of course. So my time in school when everyone else is learning. They're just mastering their instrument. You know what I'm saying? But because I had that MIDI impact, that kind of MIDI big bang for me years earlier. So by the time I did get to a school environment where I had access to every synth I could imagine, or all of these sequencing abilities and that real laboratory,
Mhm.
that's when I really started getting into those impossibly, these things that were produced that could not be played live because
Right.
that's all I heard. So naturally,
Like,
I was,
for context for those listening, you,
yeah.
what, you were 4 when you started receiving formal instruction on the drums?
Yeah, well, I started, I started like a little bit before that, but that was the age where I grabbed the local high school teacher,
Yeah.
and reached out to him, and he was like, "How old is this kid?" He's like, I'm a serious teacher. I don't teach kids."
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But then when I met him,
Yeah.
he was like, okay, you're better than me at drum kit already. Okay, let's start you with and that's when I started reading and the rudimental stuff and all of that and the percussion, introduction to theory and all those things. Because luckily, my first teacher was not just a percussion. He was also, he was a multi instrumentalist and from brass to flute. He played everything actually. So I got really lucky with that. So I never got a only drum approach. So that really kept me very broad,
Yeah. Always.
very thankful.
Um, well, I mean, I think there's, it's interesting because in certain kinds of ways, you have managed to facilitate um, different kinds of internal interconnection. Like you're like rewiring what's happening in
Hmm.
your mind in order to be able to do the kinds of things that you're doing in your music. But there's also this element of imagining how that could give back to the world of computing or like be translated back into that world.
Yes.
I know that you've been working with some computer scientists and engineers on
Hmm.
AI related implementations of
Hmm.
sort of your, seeing if you can bottle your musical approach or aspects of your musical approach and have it kind of learn itself in a new, extra, what is that? Not out of body, but like, yeah, like outside of yourself, like
Yes. Hmm.
um, kind of translate into the computer world, so that
Yes.
and learn from what you've developed, um, and for that to, I've heard you mention and read that you've mentioned in more than one instance that it kind of allows you to live on in a way into another chapter.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm curious about what's motivated that and also where that stands, and how that's going and stuff.
Oh, totally. Well, since we're so motivated by immortality, obviously I have a side of me that's like, well, let me invest in some immortal things, and that comes from sharing our expression with other people too. Your immortality, the more you get deep into other people's hippocampus, you can live longer. You know what I mean? So that's one natural way. But I also do plan on, and I'm working on this right now. Because look, I mean, artificial intelligence is kind of nothing without our input. So taking that example and that inspiration, it's like, yeah, AI needs me. I feel all of a sudden I feel needed, and wow, they need my input.
Oh, how
Wow,
sweet.
it's fantastic. It's such a sweet gesture, and that's really what it is. So with that notion, I'm like, okay, my input, here it is. So I certainly am working on like feeding as much data on myself into a VST that people could interact with. Everyone, programming rhythmic systems, and this is hard for even percussionists. Everyone has a problem with that. So we all need a new drum machine upgrade. So I'm very interested in providing something in that manner that has a lot of me in it. For instance, a drum machine that where you could actually turn on my heartbeat and at different emotions and just give you different, like, so many different parameters for you know so you're thinking differently about, like, you have a guitar piece and you're like, I need a drum system on this. Oh, D has a VST for this, let me check it out. But it may not think it you know it may not be what you think it is, because you turn it on and maybe the drum machine is like, I'm feeling good, but in order to participate in your work, I will have to feel a little better, or something like that. And you're just like, wait, what? And it's all, I'm just kidding. Here is the beat. I think you'll like it. Some things like that. Like something way more personal. I want you to be able to speak to your drum machine. You should learn from it. You know what I mean? It should teach you how to become a better musician and human. I think that should be encoded in all of our software from here on out.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you learned
Humanity
about
needs
your
it.
drum machine, so why shouldn't everyone
I love Roger Lynn. I love it when a computer is personalized. Like you put a real name on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people, like, you'll be talking like, I've been working with Roger. Roger's been doing my drums for years. And they're like, Roger who? Oh, Roger Lynn, the computer. And so I like the personification of that. A lot of him was in that machine somehow. I just want to take that to a over the top place.
And where's that at so far? How's it?
Yeah, so well, shout out to Georgia Tech. They've been very welcoming to me. I'm not part of the staff, but they've really opened the doors. I mean, I have a long history with Georgia Tech going back to the '96 Olympics. We were kind of based out of their campus, so I got very close with them back then, and it's kind of continued that relationship. But and then they brought in Gil Weinberg from MIT, the famous software writer, and just an amazing human. And we met and just kind of hit it off, and he's been so important to my kind of exploration into this world, and he's supplied me amazing people to work with on these matters, and and he's even hooked me up with Jerron Linear, so he's even got me on the phone with him just to speak. And, like, of course I invited him to my festival. He couldn't do it, but he's like, hey, I had to turn down TED this year, I had to do all this. I was like, it's all good. But he was so interested in my festival and this Technocell idea that we were talking about. So so they're very close to my heart, what I'm saying? So so shout out to them. And from there, it's just kind of been my unofficial laboratory.
Yeah.
I've been spending the most time as far as collaborating and think tanking. I've done more of that with people like Gil in the last 5 years. So I kind of needed that deep dive to then help me understand, like, oh, wait a minute, like, talk about, like, the whole engineering aspect of what I'm doing. Like, every note that you hear, everything that you hear, you see it happening.
Mm-hmm.
So when I perform for, like, an engineering school or a computing-based school, they're literally looking at it like that. Like they're quicker to that than other audiences. You know what I mean? Because it's permitted for them to think in that way. And so that's what's so refreshing, and they appreciated that. And I mean, I love a lot of the programmers out there, but going to see them live, I feel I cringe. I'm like, oh, I need to see that beat happen. I really need to see that. Why do I need to see that? Oh yeah, because I'm a human. I'm not a bot. Oh, that's why. Okay. I don't have all these nerve endings for nothing. You know what I mean? Like, people do want that challenge, and it's a lot like it's like the fashion world today. The most famous works, you see the inner workings on the outside of the clothing, and you see this inside outside game. We want to see the guts, and, like, oh cool. And that's kind of what I kind of put on display for the sake of humanity. This is kind of another thing that we're capable of. Go think about that.
Yep.
you know.
But I'm curious, in the same way that you were talking about, engineering students seeing what you're doing and being able to take it apart in a certain kind of way that isn't encouraged of most of us, but is sort of trained in them.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an aspect, or has there been any aspect to the process of working with those folks that's allowed you to see what you're doing from an external perspective, or have there been insights that have come from that kind of a process?
I mean, it's just like it was like coming home, like kind of being around, the computer scientists and that kind of atmosphere. And Georgia Tech, ironically enough, is one of the only schools that combines the music department and robotics,
Right.
for instance, and technology. So the technology and music building are like this. Thank you. That makes sense. Don't stop telling me that like this is separate from computing, separate from writing, separate from coding.
Yeah.
No, they're all tools that the brain gives us a glimpse into how it actually works.
Mm-hmm.
So these things are directly connected. I mean, obviously, it's the basis of liberal arts. The reason why astronomy, mathematician, math, all those things are together. Geometry, they're grouped together. This is we know this, but somehow we've kind of gotten away from that. Somehow, especially within the institutions. I'm saying so. That's why I felt such a need to create a portal where we could all those things collapse, like cosmology, music, AI, all of these topics kind of just come humanity, they just
All are each other, as you're pointing out, and that's always been my gripe with institutional approaches, is that they're so concerned with, you'd think of music as being a creative field, but there's actually so much of it that the way that it's taught that is about reverse engineering the work of, and it's taking apart what other people have done and trying to figure out how that worked in order to make the next thing. Like, imagine if like Steve Jobs had just been like, okay, I'm just gonna like take apart the first computer and look at it over and over again and figure out how to put it back together. Like, wouldn't be having this conversation this way right now. Like, it's just, what's so obvious to me is that you have to learn about all of the principles that are involved. You have to learn about sound as a physical phenomenon. You have to learn about sound as energy. You have to learn about it as data. You have to learn about human technology from the perspective of, where I read something where you were comparing music and athletics. It was like in a creative independent interview that you did.
Yes.
You were sort of discussing how you wanted to incorporate some of these ideas into teaching from your own perspective. And I found it so refreshing because like, this is the kind of stuff that I always wished was available. And it's why I didn't ultimately end up going to music school, or staying in music school.
Exactly. Yeah. Or furthering. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just the way.
Same here.
The way that it works. Like, if we study the things that are actually involved in understanding what we're doing and how it works, so that we can chart our own paths in terms of utilizing those things and honing the technology that we have to be able to make something of consequence that is meaningful and inspiring and uplifting to others, that isn't going to come from, I mean, this is my 2 cents, but I don't think it's generally going to come from sort of taking somebody else's approach to deconstructing why someone else's work works. You know what I mean? Like,
I know, yeah.
Your opinion of why Bach is dope is not what makes them dope. You're never gonna achieve anything. Okay, I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead, because this is a conversation that I can go on about, but it's neither here nor there because, as you
Hmm.
pointed out, there are other options for those of us who are interested in learning in this kind of way. You mentioned at the beginning of this conversation too that you are developing your own curriculum and stuff like that. Um, what is the present status of that, and how can interested parties learn about how to get involved?
Yes, I mean, thanks for sharing that data on the institutions. I mean, we've been under educational reform for so long, I can't even remember. And I could have just, obviously, I've got experience within these institutions, and, some of the good ones,
Yeah.
so they say. But, I was wildly disappointed. My parents remember when I returned from this school that it was so hyped up to me. The first semester I come back, I literally looked like I had been to prison. you know,
Yeah.
I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't wear bandanas, but somehow I found myself smoking a cigarette and wearing a bandana in front of my parents, and they're just like asking me like, "How'd it go? This was good, right? I mean, what?" And I'm just all,
Like, we spent all this money. Like,
they're like, "Yeah, the 100,000. Tell me it was good." And I was just kind of like, "It's the word. It's all wrong." It's just like, no. So that, but I'm thankful for the good parts, but the bad parts, I made sure I kept that data because, again, I was working in that real time moment. I was collecting data the whole time. Even, after finishing said school and coming back as the associate professor, I was excited at first. Oh, this is such an honor. I'm one of the youngest professors here. This is great. And then the syllabus comes in. I got to read the syllabus and then, have that ready to go. But when the students come in and you see their eyeballs and they're like something else just happened. I was just like, I can't teach you this. Like my inner, I was like, and I started slipping in my own, like tiny little things, little bits of me, not to make a correction on these curriculums, but to insert some humanity, like because when you're dealing with those people, they're not written into the course, like they're not accounted for, so they have nothing to do with it. Okay.
yeah, but
Which is,
how did you become who you are? It wasn't by following somebody else's like written out instruction guide. You know what I mean? Like,
no, and that became well, that deals with levels of fearlessness that fearlessness data that I've had to stack up, and you get that in modicums as you go. If you find a little crumb here and there, you just pile it in. It doesn't come in big heaps, but that's just over time of being able to have mentors since I was a child. That's you're talking a lot of data and me looking at adults and seeing how and getting his data and because you gotta understand, like at that age, I had so many more neurons than these adults did, and I felt that I'm like, I'm a little more than these people, even though they're bigger and so-called more educated, but somehow I saw eye to eye with them. I feel like I was really tapping into something deeply universal somehow. So those kind of moments have really helped, and each person has kind of given me a chunk of, a jewel of energy of to keep going. And you can find that in many different places. It may be one person who says a halfway comment that you really, really admire, and they're like, "Yeah, that piece you did, it was kind of good," and you're just like, I'm putting that in the I gotta put that in my thing, before it gets stale, and like I gotta use that in the future. So a lot of moments like that have kept me very individualistic, and I was kind of taught not to be a group
yeah,
person, even though that's a lot of our human history is pack. Like it's how we that's how we survived a lot of these much larger animals and things like that over the years is by that pack mentality. But that can also hurt you. You have to also be careful of that because if that pack dies, you die too. you know, you kind of oh, if you're going to stick to that, then you got to stick to that group, and that you may not want to do that. So I've kind of, it's made me into a natural maverick, you know. So, and that was early. Also, by the time college came around, I was like, oh no,
But
you
I
know.
feel like that's good mentors will do that to you because you
Yes.
are not, I mean, anybody who knows anything or who's arrived at anything had more than just that one data point. You know, like if
Oh yeah, it's many data.
that
Yeah.
you learn about in school is a single, it amounts to a single perspective. And
Yes.
ultimately, there are many. And um, getting exposed to as many of them as possible, especially from folks who have themselves been thoughtful and have sought out that exposure in their lifetimes.
Absolutely.
You know, and again, it's like in the same way that if you are in the sciences, like, and you're looking at academic programs, it's like, okay, well, our laboratory has all of these resources and we have a fMRI machine and we have this. And, you know, like, it's like
Yeah.
with music, they'll be like, oh, the rehearsal rooms are real nice. And it's just like the technology that's there is in the mentors. You know,
Yes. That's right.
that's what you're looking for is what is housing the keys to the information that's needed, you know, and to the perspective that is needed to be able to take all of these inputs and run them through one's own experience and one's own perspective. And I think that that is something that's, it's very hard to teach, but it's also, in my experience, like the people who were the best at teaching that or have been the best at teaching that to imparting that, I should say, are on paper the worst teachers. They don't have training and education.
Right. Yeah.
They don't show up to class. You know, like it's like,
Right.
but the thing that you get is being around somebody enough and starting to be able to, just like you were saying, those engineering students were doing when they were watching you, to be able to, you know, learn through that kind of observation of reaction and to start to understand the mechanisms that have evolved over the course of that person's artistic practice, you know.
Precisely.
But are you, you know, are there any programs in development or, you know, already on the schedule, things that you're working on that I can let people, or we can let people know about right now? Or
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So like about I guess 2 months ago or end of July, I because of all this data and all these feelings, as you know me closely, these things have been brewing, and so I've, instead of continuing to complain about it, which I will, but I had to make a move, and that move was to start what I call Technocell School of Philosophy, and it's made to be a broad term, but essentially it's begun. I've put out a couple of, I've been very vague with my sending out the bat signal, but it's made to be in that way, to find those like particles, those people who are thinking like me in this particular time period, and I've created a portal for them, and we just, obviously it's based off of this techno-self philosophy, that, listen, this is about the self. And the self is also plural. It's also about all of us. It's kind of a very empowering, humanistic, revealing. It's a result of me cross-referencing many different curriculums, again, over many years, and compiling this in a way that it functions, as a living curriculum. It's a one-on-one system. I spend an hour a week with typical participants, and some people do once a month. Most people do once a week, and there's returns every week. There's deliverables every week, there's different system creation every week. You know, there's everyone involved is very different. There's percussionists, there's computer coders, there's 3D, polygonal manipulators. There's all kinds of different people, and we address them all as creative technologists, and we support their imagination. And I push them using my own personal data, which the curriculum is different for each person because I deal with the participants' own flux of energy and productivity and whatever system they use to create. We just basically upgrade this and remind them of all these other things, like you said, that like we wish our schools had done for us. But that's fine. That was for us to gain that data to understand what to create next. So I'm putting my foot forward with this, and it's been over 2 months now, and it's just the byproduct of such an experiment is just ridiculous. Like everyone there is such a great example of humanity. You know what I mean? And they're all into the concept, and so it's amazing, man. So if anyone is interested, of course, you can just email me at technoselfs@gmail.com for any more details. Yeah, selves plural. Yeah, so TECHNOSEFS at Gmail.
In there,
That's right. Yeah.
but oh my God, does the Technocell School of Philosophy have merch, and does it come in black?
Oh, I got you, man. I'm already. I got some things brewing with that, because it's the portal is what I call it. Is really going to function as many different things, not just a laboratory where I help people just incubate their ideas and grow them, and grow systems to get these things done, but also it will function as I have my own label, and I would love to feature some of these works in that way, and through my Technoself Immersive Festival that will be digital this year, of course, online, perhaps next month. Definitely be on the lookout for that. But I want to have a section that features TSOP participants, and so it's really a big part of my life. As I've kind of been working on this, and it's so nice to see the evolution from me making a 12-week course, that was very much in that institutional, format, which I had to do, but then to see it progress to what it is now as this kind of living portal, and like you said, like we go to these institutions because of the people, the personnel. It's always been about that, John Hopkins has to have like a name cardiologist, they got to have a name, it's all about that, the person. So it's essentially getting back to that. I mean, the school is based on my personal data, and how it is triggered by participants. And that's the most pure, fastest transaction of data that I could create for all involved.
Yep.
So it essentially will act as a kind of nuclear fusion reactor for all of the people involved. And, we have our own Discord community. So we have our own private server. So we connect there, chat, video, all the things happen there. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone is welcome. Everyone is welcome.
If you are interested in what you've heard us talking about over the course of the last hour, do not miss your opportunity to learn from one of the leading minds doing this today. And in closing, I just want to ask, we can get enmeshed in the how and why of technology. We can be inspired by the how and why of technology, but ultimately, we think of technology as being important in some ways because it's a means to an end. But as they say, it's about the journey, not the destination sometimes,
Facts.
And
True.
So I'm curious, in your drive and your, apparently relentless pursuit of running up against these borders, in ways that people have done, people who have inspired, I think both of us have done in the past, but also in a way that's unique to your own path. What is technology a means to an end for you?
For me, it's all about communication. It's just clearly what we're here to do as computing systems, and obviously to even consider ourselves technology, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's like, what are you expressing? You're a creation machine. You know what I'm saying? So it comes down to saying something.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better or more succinctly. Thank you so much, D.
Such an honor, Rafiq.
The honor is mine. Yeah, it's been amazing speaking with you, and I'll look forward to the next one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, my man.
All right, sir. You take care. Have a good day.
Such an honor. Peace.